Thank you. And it's time now for our author showcase. And we have an author interview. We're definitely going to be switching it up, going from the inspiration passion to a genre that has nothing to do with it, really. We have an author joining us, and if you are in a fan that's interested in dark fantasy novels, this one's going to be a treat for you, so stick around for that. And don't forget, we will be posting some special treats for readers and authors, and it all starts right after this on Book Tour Radio.
You're listening to Book Tour Radio on WMRN, the Women's Movement Radio Network. Tune in for Book Tour Radio every Saturday at 12 noon Eastern Time. If you're an author and would like to be featured on our website or on the show, just go to booktourradio.com and click on the Get Publicity tab. Check the Services tab too for other ways that we can help you.
Welcome back. Well, it is time for our author showcase, and we have another extended author showcase this week where we have a guest joining us. And today our guest is joining us in a genre, well, he's labeled in a genre that we have not featured before. My guest is Adam Santo, and he is categorized as an author in horror novels with zombies. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and the fact that he is actually a writer of dark fantasy. So, hello, Adam. Thank you for joining us today on Book Tour Radio Showcase.
Well, thank you.
Well, it is good to have you. And when I first saw that you did horror novels, it, of course, took me out of my comfort zone because I'm a chicken. So I really don't personally delve into a lot of horror novels and things like anything that's categorized like that, and because I'm just a chicken about stuff like that, still have nightmares about Nightmare on Elm Street and things like that. So unfortunately, because of that, we have not had enough in this genre featured on Book Tour Radio. So it's awesome that we have you. And then I now understand that you are a little bit categorized incorrectly to be thrown into that.
Yes.
So we'll get into that. But before we do, I always like to know a little bit more about how this writing gig started for you. When did you realize that you had a passion for writing in any genre?
Well, I find it kind of a funny story. I've always written. As far as going back to from junior high, I had a paper due, and it was due that day. So my teacher, of course, told me I needed it to be done or I'd get an F, and it wasn't so fancy. It didn't make me happy that I would get an F. So I sat down real quick. Within an hour, popped out a one-page paper with the beginning, middle, and end, and he just stared at it and gave me an A, and I didn't think about it at the time, but
wow.
I realized I should have realized that I had a talent to do some form of writing. Since then, I've just sat on my computer with many computer crashes. I've learned since then to back up my computer. But
you don't want to lose any novels in there.
I have. That's the terrible part. I've rewritten one novel that's still my baby. I have not put it out anywhere. I'm barely even gotten started. I still have some things to work out. But that I've been working on. And my wife one day, I was trying to doing one of those writing prompts on a forum. That's what I was trying to think of. And it was just a quick 500-word little white writing prompt. And she read it, and she's like, well, why don't you try to expand? Why don't you write something more? So I wrote what turned out to be Tempted in Rising.
Wow.
And that's how that had begun. And knowing I wanted to be a writer, I always had a passion for it. I've always written, but I've written for myself. And actually, we were just talking about that today, and I was explaining to her, I was like, I don't know how to answer a question like this because it wasn't me, it was you. And
Wow.
my inspiration actually came from my wife.
Well, that's awesome too, and I think that's always neat whenever I hear something like that, because it's that it just came naturally to you. You were able to whip it out and just get that story on paper when push came to shove and you needed to, and then you had these indicators from the people that had an opportunity to read your work, and you may not have realized it, that it was good stuff, and they were appreciating it. So that's really neat. So you have to remember that, so that when they turn your stuff into a movie, you always remember to give your wife credit for launching it all, and really encouraging you on.
Yeah, then that's why I had to point that out on this in particular. It's written as a trilogy, so she gets credit on the first one, but I'm forced to take credit on the next two.
Awesome. And explain to me how, because you are, in a sense, categorized in this genre of horror, and that really doesn't tell the true story of what your stories are all about. And it was one of the things that kind of it scared me, because I am one of those people who are chicken. I am like not the person who's going to line up to see a gruesome type of story or anything. I'm just a chicken when it comes to stuff like that. Scary movies. But yours aren't really, they're not gruesome, so they're kind of miscategorized. Tell us how that happened.
Well, when you think of horror, obviously you think of Stephen King and Dean Koontz, where the point of reading or watching one
Lots
of their
of blood
movies
and guts
is to
and
be
stuff.
And to be scared. I mean, it's to literally be scared.
Yeah.
Or mine. I think you could probably relate them more. It's not the same type of story, but like Resident Evil, those movies that have come out. It's not. Well, there's a lot of blood and gore in those, but it's more of a thriller than a horror film.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Is they also deal with what we considered zombies and whatnot. But my whole thing was, it's a thriller and it's suspenseful, but I keep low key on any kind of blood. And quite honestly, I really aimed for not having any real cuss words in it. I thought that would be something nice for what we've been experiencing these day and age. All the cussing and everything you see out there now.
Yeah, it's like gratuitous.
You see our generation
throwing it in. Yeah.
But mine, as I said, it's how I had imagined it was that my zombies, that Sally, which is the main character, she dies and comes back. It's from a terrible crash, but it's not. It's left to the reader's imagination, is how I made most of the gruesome scenes. I left it to you to imagine it instead of me telling you there was blood and everything.
I like that. I like that. That way, the reader, if they happen to be really into a lot of gore and gruesome stuff, they can fill in those blanks themselves. And if they're like me, more of on the chicken side, they can clean it up and just say, okay, it wasn't real messy.
Yes. And like I said, my zombies, I usually label them in the book as the true undead, because you have vampires, obviously, and they are in the book, which actually have a grudge against Sally and her kind, because they truly are undead. You can stab a vampire with a stick and they die. So they're immortal, but to a point.
Right.
And Sally and her group are truly undead, because you can do anything to them, they still live.
Right. They're still going to exist.
Yes, but they also have to work out, and it's in the book, but they have a certain way they have to work things out so that they appear like you and I. So they keep their lives, and they actually integrate themselves into the society, so that they can continue hiding themselves. And as one point, they made one of the national forests in Colorado a sanctuary for them by, staking it and having someone go up as a senator and earmarking it in one of the bills to actually keep it for the supernatural beings and
That's
keeping
cool.
that area safe.
That's cool. That's definitely neat.
So they're able to integrate themselves because they look like you and I, but they're only able to do that through certain methods, and it's, like I said in the book. Otherwise, they continually decay, which is the point of them being a zombie. Because they are dead.
I love it. And you have 3 books out now. Am I correct? There's the 3 you have.
Yes.
And
the 2 for Temperature Trilogy, and then there's a short that's offered out there free is Ocean's Fury. It's a short. If you put it on paper, it's about 10 pages long.
Okay.
It's a ocean voyage that goes terribly bad.
Yeah, it almost sounded like the recent Carnival thing.
Yeah, but unfortunately that did happen. But my story actually came out well before that ever came
Oh
out.
yeah, no, I saw that that was definitely, but it was kind of funny. I was like, oh wow, Carnival, not to pick on Carnival unnecessarily, but I love the way Ocean Fury was described because it does sound really like a fun read. Where the description on Ocean's Fury is, you are the story. Your vacation has just been ransacked by evil. A tempest brews near an island, and passengers of a cruise ship are taken for the ride of their lives. So that's why it was really funny. I thought, oh, okay, that's kind of funny. It's funny, but then it's not.
Yes, the parallels are uncanny, but the things that happen in my story don't happen there, luckily.
Right, luckily.
Yes.
And then, so your Temperature trilogy, you have the first book is Dead and Rising. So it's the same character that's kind of running through the storyline.
Yes, you're following Sally and her cohort, which is Bo. His full name. I've always had a thing for this name that I wrote way back in high school, and I've tried to figure out where to put it. And I gave him the name Bocnick. It's Bocnic. And, it's just easier to say that his name is Bo throughout the book, but I was trying to give him give him a formal old world feel to his name.
That's neat.
Something that isn't heard too often. I thought it was an interesting name. I couldn't figure out if I was going to use that as a place or a name of a person, and it's always stuck with me for eons now. So I finally found a home for that word.
Which is neat, too, because that's kind of like the power of being an author, where you can draw from different things that interest you, and then you incorporate them into your story, and then they have a life all their own. Then it's there, and it's immortalized in your story. So this word or title or name or a place or, something that was really fun for you to think about and to imagine and to create, you're able to put it into your story, and then it's there. It has its own life, undead be it that it is. So the first story, Temperature, Dead and Rising, and then your sequel is Temperature, Bitter Cold, and so you've got a third one that's going to round out this storyline then, and that's kind of in the works. It's
yet untitled, and hopefully I'll have it completed by the end of the year. I'm working on a current project, just giving myself a moment to complete what I think will be the end to that trilogy. I'm trying to do some work in between it so I can give myself a buffer between the two. And it's because it's a friend of mine that produced a movie, and he asked me after reading my books if I would adapt his movie into a novel. So I'm actually working on that currently.
Awesome, awesome. That sounds like a neat project in itself.
Yes,
So.
it's something original that I've not done. It's original to me because I've never done such a thing. So it's a unique opportunity.
So this is like a whole new world that's kind of opened up to you, just connecting with this skill that you've had all along, and just getting to the point of acknowledging it and acknowledging that you have this passion for writing and storytelling. And now there are all these other opportunities that are opening up because of that. So that's neat. Where do you see your career going? Are you envisioning and have different storylines and things that you're kind of putting on shelves, thinking, okay, when I get time, I'm going to write about this, and I'm going to write about this? Are you starting to see a whole bunch of different storylines unfold of things that are on the horizon for you?
Oh yes, I've got at least 5 or 6 Word documents with a short blurb of things that I've come up with. So there's potential for standalone books, 5 or 6 sitting on my computer right now that I need to get back to. But it's things just continually pop up. I think of it as did you ever see the show that Ray Bradbury did, where he'd sit at his desk? That show was based on one of his stories.
Oh.
But they always started with him sitting at the desk, and they zoom into one item that's around the room, and that's sort of, he would pick a story from a toy robot that was sitting on his desk, and he'd go with that.
That's neat.
I'm just giving an image of, not what I exactly do. I don't sit at my desk with items. But it's about the same difference. I'm driving down the road and I see
different
something.
Stimuli,
I'm like,
things that are stimulating thoughts and ideas. Neat.
Oh, yes.
Well, that's fun. When you write these stories, what do you hope that readers are going to experience when they read an Adam Santo book?
Well, obviously, I'm just hoping that they get a great ride from visiting a world that they've not experienced before.
And we hope they don't either, right? So.
Well, yeah, we don't want what they got in the book, no. But what I mean is going through and reading a story that has been redone so many times, such as vampires. We had from Bram Stoker all the way up to now the Twilight series. There's a whole reimagining of one type of character, a vampire,
mm-hmm.
whereas I'm doing a zombie, and I've taken it from the original Walking Dead to what I believe could be a different view
kind
of
like
the
a
same
functional zombie
character. Yes.
Yeah.
So I just getting a different view of a character you've always known, something that's known and now it's been twisted to fit a different genre. I mean, it almost fits into a different genre, but yet it still falls under horror because it's a zombie or a vampire. Or, Bram Stoker, if you've read the original story for Dracula, there's not a lot of blood, or there's suggestions to it, but it's still labeled as horror. And that's how I think mine, in a roundabout way, became listed also as horror as a genre.
But it's more like a dark fantasy thriller suspense. Yes. Awesome. And you've got, we'll make sure our listeners know the sites to find you and to find your work. But one is called one of your websites is panhandlingfantasy.com.
Yes.
What is that site all about, and how is that different from your main author site?
Well, at being a self-published author, an indie author, I was trying to figure out, because when I published my first one, I was given the opportunity to have a branding, just like Tor or any other company that publishes books, Penguin Group and so forth, all the different ones that are out there for the big publishing houses. And I was given the opportunity to put that in, and I didn't take it. And I thought about it after publishing the first book, which is Dead and Rising. But they once they labeled it theirs, I couldn't add that in. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to have my own little branding for my books? So I came up with Panhandling Fantasy. It's a play on words only because I live in Florida, which is right there in the Panhandle. So it's panhandling, and of course I write fantasy.
Awesome. And that's a good tip for indie authors to think about, especially if they're not planning on being a one-hit wonder and they're planning on continuing to build on their brand and to continue to build a following and have more books to come other than just the one great American novel, and they're planning on writing more. It's good to think about that, to think if, even if they're writing different types of books and different genres, but to think about some moniker or some way of branding so it helps for readers to say, oh, okay, I am familiar with this branding, this type of writing, this author's work, and it's much easier for them to find you and to connect with that repeat experience, or to come to know what to expect under that brand.
Oh, yes.
So that's a good tip. That's a really good tip. Is there any other advice that you probably would have for an indie author, given that it's just such a fascinating time for writers to be able to have access to fans and to readers who want to read what they have written, and we don't have as much restriction as there have been in the past, where unless some stodgy editor behind a desk of a publishing house wanted that and that was the soup of the day, if it wasn't, you didn't have a chance. Your stuff didn't make it to market, and now we've
Absolutely
cut out
right.
that middleman, so it's awesome. What advice from your journey as an independent writer would you want to pass on to those aspiring writers who are listening to us?
Well, obviously there's plenty of opportunity out there as far as a publisher goes. I mean, there's tons of indie publishers that you can pick from. I would really, from an author's point of view, pay attention to how much they're going to charge you to buy your own book to sell it. That above all else, it's, I've seen where if your book is offered for $15.99, they're going to let you buy it from them for $12.99. And as far as an author goes, and you're just starting out, that makes a big difference on how many book signings you're going to be able to have.
Right.
If you go out and buy your own books and go out to do something with it, it limits how many times you can do that in a year, unless your all-American novel is out there and it's selling great. Otherwise,
then it's like
I would
more like
really
the publisher's making the money and the author's barely making anything for their work. So, you
got to worry about that double dipping. They're getting from the reader and the author. And I really, as far as any author goes, I would really check their website before publishing, before actually choosing someone to go through. If you really want a hardcover, some companies only offer paperback. I mean, there's a couple options, so you have to weigh your odds of really getting out there with what you want it to be.
Right.
And I
really
just,
pay attention to
research,
the details.
Yes, research before choosing. I mean, you might think this company sounds great because you've heard of them so many times, but you may want to look deeper into the royalties and how much it's going to actually charge you to buy the book. That's something I didn't do early on, and when I published a couple times, it's something that you realize too late.
Right. After you sign
so
the dotted
research
line,
is,
right.
Yes. You want to research. That's the best I can say.
Good advice for aspiring writers that hopefully they'll take note of. So, well, thank you so much, Adam, for joining us today on our extended showcase on Book Tour Radio. I want to make
thank
sure.
You.
Oh, this has been fun, and like I said, it's been new for me. I almost was afraid of you because I have my own personal fears of horror, and you're not so scary. So,
oh, no.
So, and it's good to know that sometimes writing might be categorized, and I think this is good advice for any listeners to not be prejudiced of a potential work that you could really enjoy just because somebody labeled it. And this you've kind of gotten, because there are zombies in your books, you kind of got labeled in horror. And there are some people that's their thing. They love that. But there might be people like me who love suspense and thrillers, but the minute someone said it's horror, I'd be like, okay, not my cup of tea. So that's good to know that for a listener to know if they're looking for a good read, go a little deeper past the general label that book might be under, just to kind of at least read the blurb and see if it's really what you're kind of interested in, because it might have been mislabeled, and it might have, just because of one aspect of that story, it might have gotten thrown in a category, and then you've got all these suspense thriller fans out there that might think, oh, I'm not going to read that stuff because that's going to be the real gory, there's fingers being chopped off all over the place, things like that.
Yeah.
And that's not what your work is about. So I think that's a good lesson for our listeners and our readers out there. Go a little deeper, especially with an Adam Santo novel, because it might come under that label of horror, but there's a lot more meat to it, and it's not chopped up and bleeding. So
no, it's not chopped.
Now, I want to make sure that our listeners know how to find you. Now, we've got 2 websites we can send them to, of course. There's the main website, which is easy, wonderful. Sometimes they have authors with very elaborate names that are difficult to spell, and yours is nice and easy. They can go to www.adamsanto.com, and it just the way it sounds, ADAM, and then SANTO.com. Nice and easy. And they can also go onto the site, which is where you're starting to build the branding for the body of work that you're doing. And it sounds like there's going to be a lot more to come. www.panhandlingfantasy.com. And next to our feature of Adam on our website today, you'll be able to see these links. So if you didn't have a pen handy, you could just click the links and go right over to Adam's site and find out more about his books. And then those 3 books, again, that are out there right now, but it sounds like there is a lot more to come. So jump on board. There's the 2 that are the beginning parts of a trilogy, Temperature, Dead and Rising, and then Temperature, Bitter Cold. And then if you just want to get a taste of Adam's writing, there's that short, it's Ocean's Fury, to take a peek at. So thank you again, Adam, for joining us. This has been a fun contribution to our program because we have not covered this type of work as much before. So thank you for joining us.
I'm happy to be a part of it.
Oh, awesome to have you. So thank you. Well, we'll be right back right after this.